When we bought the lake house, my husband and I promised ourselves it would be our sanctuary. A quiet place away from the noise of the city, a retreat where we could heal, laugh, and breathe in peace. For months we poured our savings and sweat into fixing it up, scraping walls, sanding floors, and painting until our arms ached. Finally, it was perfect. We planned to invite the family for a slow introduction, one by one, so we could share our joy in a calm way. But my sister had other ideas. On a bright Saturday morning, we unlocked the door only to find cars already lined up outside the driveway. Not one car, not two, but nearly 7 of them. Out spilled cousins, in-laws, and people I hadn't seen in years. 20 relatives in total, laughing, carrying coolers, dragging bags, waving like it was a grand reunion. My sister stepped forward, smiling as if she had just orchestrated the greatest surprise party in history. The problem? She never asked. She never even hinted. I felt my jaw tighten. Our sanctuary, the home we had been dreaming of, was suddenly overrun with loud voices, running children, and relatives claiming rooms like it was a free hotel. My husband squeezed my hand, silently asking me to stay calm. I forced a smile, but inside my chest a storm brewed. Because what my sister didn't know was that we had been planning our own surprise that very weekend. And when it came out, none of them would forget it. When I first stepped out of the car and breathed in the crisp lake air, I thought I had finally found peace. The house stood at the edge of the water, its wooden deck still smelling of fresh varnish, the glass windows glinting under the morning sun. It had taken months of scraping, sanding, and painting, but every ounce of effort had been worth it. This lake house wasn't just a building, it was our dream. My husband and I had imagined it for years. A private retreat where the noise of the city couldn't follow us, where traffic and deadlines didn't exist, and where the only sound at night would be the gentle lap of waves against the shore. We had poured everything into it. Our savings, our sweat, our weekends that could have been spent anywhere else but were instead dedicated to cleaning up moldy walls, patching up broken beams, and polishing old floorboards until they gleamed. And now it was ready. For the first time in years, I felt a strange and precious lightness, as if life had finally given me something back. This house was meant to be our sanctuary, and we planned to introduce it to the family carefully, one by one, so they could share our joy without overwhelming the fragile peace we had built here. But of course, peace never lasts long when my sister is involved. At first, I didn't realize what was happening. I noticed the cars before I noticed the people. 3, then 4, then 7 of them, parked haphazardly along the gravel drive, their shiny metal bodies breaking the quiet scene we had envisioned. My husband frowned, his hand tightening around the steering wheel as he slowed to a stop. "Are those?" he began, but I already knew. My stomach dropped. Doors slammed in quick succession, and suddenly the air was filled with voices, laughter, and the sound of children's feet pounding on the earth. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, aunts who lived 2 towns over, in-laws who rarely even called, all of them spilling onto the grass with coolers, folding chairs, and bags as if this were some kind of planned reunion. 20 of them at least, maybe more. They looked like an army descending on a prize. And then I saw her, my sister, standing in the middle of it all, smiling like she had orchestrated the grandest surprise in history. She waved dramatically, her sunglasses perched on her head, her hair styled as though she had been preparing for a photo shoot rather than a casual weekend. "Surprise!" she called out, her voice slicing through the chaos. "We thought we'd all come together to see your new place." I stood frozen, my hand on the car door, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. We hadn't invited anyone yet. We had planned to have my parents visit next month, maybe my husband's sister the month after. But not like this. Not 20 relatives at once, barging in as if the house belonged to them. My throat went dry, but I forced a smile because what else could I do with so many eyes on me? "Oh wow," I said weakly as I stepped out, my legs trembling under the weight of my anger. My husband shot me a glance that said everything. "Do you want me to handle this?" But I shook my head, unwilling to make a scene in front of the crowd. They came at us like a wave, hugging, chattering, shouting compliments about the house as if their intrusion would be softened by flattery. "It's gorgeous," one cousin exclaimed, dragging her suitcase across the gravel and up the deck. We can't wait to see our rooms, another said, as if they had already claimed spaces inside. My aunt, who hadn't spoken more than a handful of words to me in years, shoved a casserole dish into my hands and kissed my cheek. The children darted past me, squealing, running toward the water before I could warn them about the slippery rocks near the dock. I felt like I had been swallowed whole. Inside it was worse. Bags were dropped on the polished floors, coolers shoved against the walls, shoes kicked off in every direction. My sister led the parade, giving herself the role of tour guide as though she were the one who had worked to restore the place. Look at this kitchen, she announced, flinging open cupboards and drawers. And the view. Oh, this will be perfect for family barbecues. I clenched my jaw, my nails digging into my palms as I tried to breathe evenly. She hadn't asked. She hadn't even mentioned she was coming, let alone bringing an entire crowd. She had decided on her own that our sanctuary was community property. I tried to keep my composure, but every corner of the house felt invaded. Cousins threw themselves onto couches, uncles opened beers without asking, and two of the kids ran up the stairs and started arguing over which bedroom they would take. My husband followed me quietly, his hand brushing mine every few minutes like a lifeline. At one point he leaned close and whispered, "Say the word and I'll ask them to leave." The thought of throwing them all out, of reclaiming my space by sheer force, was tempting. I could almost taste the satisfaction. But I knew what would happen. Tears, accusations, whispered family gossip that would follow me for years. Ungrateful. Cold. She thinks she's better than us. The labels would stick, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. So I smiled. He nodded. I let them trample across my dream home while something inside me cracked. My sister clapped her hands, oblivious to my tension. Aren't you glad I brought everyone? We wanted to be the first to celebrate with you. And don't worry, we brought food, drinks, everything. It'll be like a party. She beamed, expecting me to shower her with gratitude. Instead, I only managed a tight-lipped, "Yes, what a surprise." As the day dragged on, the house grew louder. Music blared from someone's speaker. Kids screamed as they splashed in the shallows of the lake, and adults laughed with mouths full of food, crumbs scattering on my freshly polished counters. I retreated to the back porch, needing a moment of silence. My husband joined me, his expression mirroring my exhaustion. "This isn't right," he said quietly. I shook my head, staring out at the calm water that seemed so far removed from the chaos inside. "It's not. But let them have their fun for now," I whispered. "They don't know what this place really is. Not yet." He raised an eyebrow and slowly, a small smile tugged at his lips. We both knew the surprise we had been planning, the one my sister and her uninvited guests had unknowingly stumbled into. And the thought of that gave me just enough strength to go back inside and face the madness with my chin held high. Still, as I lay in bed that night, listening to muffled laughter and footsteps echoing through the house, a part of me ached. This place was supposed to be sacred, safe space. But now it felt contaminated, like a fragile secret exposed before it was ready. I turned to my husband, who brushed my hair from my face and whispered, "Tomorrow they'll find out. And things will never be the same." I clung to that promise, because it was the only thing that let me sleep as the storm of voices raged on around me. That night I barely slept. Even with the bedroom door closed, the noise seeped in through the walls, the sound of glasses clinking, of unrestrained laughter, of children running up and down the hallway long past midnight. Every thud made me tense. Every burst of shouting reminded me that this house, which I had so carefully crafted into a sanctuary, was no longer mine, at least not in that moment. My husband lay beside me, his arm draped over my shoulder, steady and grounding, but I could feel the same restlessness in him. The bed we had chosen together, the quilt I had stitched with hours of quiet work, the very air of the room felt invaded by the presence of too many people who had taken too much without asking. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the wooden beams with my eyes, silently repeating to myself that this was temporary, that soon they would all leave, that their laughter would fade and the quiet we craved would return. But beneath that thought was another, sharper one. They had crossed a line, and I would not let it happen again. Morning came with chaos. The smell of bacon and coffee hit me before I even opened the door, but instead of comfort, it carried a weight of dread. My kitchen, my clean, polished kitchen, was overflowing with bodies. An uncle I barely spoke to was frying eggs like he owned the stove. Two cousins sat at the counter, crumbs scattered across the marble, while one of their children spilled orange juice that no one bothered to wipe up. My sister was at the center of it all, laughing, directing, as though she were the hostess and I merely a guest. "There she is," she called out when I appeared in the doorway, clapping her hands together. "The lady of the house. We're just getting breakfast ready for everyone. You don't mind, do you?" She said it casually, without even waiting for my answer, as if the question was rhetorical and my permission irrelevant. My throat tightened. I wanted to shout that yes, I did mind, that this wasn't some communal vacation house, that boundaries mattered. But I caught my husband's eye from across the room, and he gave me a subtle shake of his head. "Not yet," he seemed to say. So I swallowed my words. I smiled faintly, muttered something about coffee, and slipped past the crowd to the porch outside. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint mist of the lake. I wrapped my arms around myself, staring out at the water, willing it to calm the storm inside me. My husband joined me a moment later, handing me a mug. "How much longer can you keep quiet?" he asked softly. I shook my head, staring into the dark liquid swirling in my cup. "Not long. But today they'll see. They think this house is a playground, but we'll show them what it really is." His lips curved into a smile. "You're ready?" he asked. "I've been ready," I replied. By mid-morning, the noise had grown unbearable again. Relatives argued over which activities to do first. Some wanted to take the boats out, others insisted on swimming, while a few were already planning a barbecue by the fire pit. They barked orders, moved furniture, and opened cupboards without a thought. I stood silently, observing the chaos like a stranger in my own home. My sister finally noticed my quietness and came over. Her voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. "What's wrong with you? You look miserable. You should be happy. Everyone's having fun. This is what family's about, isn't it?" Her words dripped with condescension, as if I were a child sulking over nothing. I forced myself to look at her. "Family is about respect," I said calmly. "It's about asking before you take. It's about knowing where the line is." Her smile faltered just slightly, but she quickly masked it. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed, brushing me off and walking back into the crowd. That was the breaking point. I felt my chest tighten, but instead of anger boiling over into yelling, I let the resolve harden inside me. They wanted a show. They would get one, just not the kind they expected. I waited until everyone was gathered in the living room. It didn't take much. My sister had already been planning to make an announcement about a family lake tradition, whatever that meant, so I suggested we all come together. Chairs scraped, voices carried, children whined. The room filled quickly, bodies pressed together, conversations buzzing. I stood at the front with my husband at my side, his hand firm against my back. My heart raced, but my voice, when it came, was steady. "Thank you all for coming," I began, and immediately my sister's face lit up, expecting gratitude, praise, some acknowledgement of her grand gesture. I let her bask in it for a brief second before continuing. "You may think this house is for vacations, for family gatherings, for weekends of fun. But it's not. This house has a different purpose." The room quieted, curiosity prickling in the air. "When we bought this place," I said, "we didn't buy it just for us. We bought it to share. Not in the way you think." I paused, my eyes sweeping the room, letting the silence stretch, but in a deeper way. "Starting next month, this house will become a retreat center. We're partnering with a local program to provide a safe space for families who've lost their homes, for people who need rest and healing. It's not a free vacation spot. It's a sanctuary meant for service, not selfishness." The effect was immediate. The chatter stopped completely. The children fidgeted, confused by the sudden seriousness. Adults exchanged glances. One cousin slowly lowered the bag of chips he had been eating from. My aunt, the one who had brought the casserole, blinked as though I had spoken in another language. And then finally, all eyes turned to my sister. She was pale, her mouth opening and closing without sound, caught completely off guard. This house, I continued firmly, was never meant to be a free-for-all. It's not here to be claimed like a hotel. It's here to do good. And if you want to be part of that, you're welcome to help. But if not, you'll need to respect what this place is meant to be. For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke. The silence was louder than the chaos that had filled the house all morning. Then came the awkward shuffling. My uncle coughed, muttered something about needing to check on his car. A cousin mumbled that they had somewhere else to be. One by one, they began to retreat, their earlier excitement replaced by discomfort. No one had expected this. No one had thought beyond their own enjoyment. My sister sat stiffly, her pride deflating before my eyes. She finally muttered, "Well, you could have told me," but her voice lacked its usual bite. For the first time in years, I saw her unsure, small, stripped of her control. By late afternoon, the house was emptying. Cars started up, doors slammed, voices called hurried goodbyes. A few offered half-hearted apologies. Most avoided eye contact altogether. My sister lingered the longest, packing slowly, as though delaying the inevitable. When she finally walked past me, she didn't meet my eyes. "You made your point," she said quietly, bitterness laced in her tone. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. When the last car rolled away and the gravel drive fell silent again, I stood on the porch with my husband. The lake was calm, rippling gently under the fading light. The house, though disturbed, was ours again. My husband slipped his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "They'll never forget this weekend," he murmured. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the water. "Good," I said softly. "Because I won't either." For the first time in days, the silence was exactly what I had wanted. Whole, undisturbed, and entirely mine. The silence the following morning was almost startling. I woke up before the sun had fully risen, the room bathed in that pale gray light that seems to hold its breath before the day begins. For the first time since we had arrived, there were no footsteps running across the hall, no doors slamming, no voices shouting through the walls. The house was still, and I could hear the gentle hum of the lake outside. My husband was still asleep, his breathing steady, one arm thrown across the quilt, as though exhaustion had finally claimed him after 2 days of hosting uninvited chaos. I slipped quietly from the bed and padded across the floor, my bare feet pressing against the cool wood we had sanded and polished with such care. The silence felt sacred, and I was determined to soak in every second of it before the day unfolded. On the porch, the air was crisp and carried a faint mist from the lake. I wrapped myself in a blanket, cradled a cup of coffee in my hands, and watched the water shift with the first touches of morning light. For the first time since the invasion of my sister's entourage, I felt like myself again. But beneath the relief lay something sharper, a thread of unease that tugged at me. The relatives might have left, their laughter and crumbs carried away with them, but my sister had not truly left. She had walked out, yes, but I knew her. She had been embarrassed, exposed, and people like her never let things end like that. She would find a way to twist the story, to make herself the victim and me the villain, and the thought of it hung over me like a storm cloud waiting to break. By the time my husband joined me, the sun had fully risen, painting the lake in shades of gold and blue. He kissed the top of my head, sat beside me, and stretched his legs with a groan. "It feels like the house is breathing again," he said, and I smiled faintly. "It does. But I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over." He raised an eyebrow, sipping from his mug. "You mean your sister?" I nodded, staring out at the ripples on the water. "She doesn't take humiliation lightly. She'll twist this around. You know she will." He shrugged, calm as ever. "Let her. The truth is the truth. You stood your ground. And no matter how she spins it, We know what happened." His confidence comforted me, but still, my gut twisted with anticipation of what was to come. We spent most of that day cleaning up. It was astonishing how much mess 20 people could leave behind in just a short stay. Crumbs had found their way into couch cushions, sticky rings stained the counters, and fingerprints smudged the windows I had polished just days before. My husband and I worked side by side, moving silently at times, chatting softly at others, our movements almost meditative. Every sweep of the broom, every wipe of a cloth, felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from us. By late afternoon, the house began to resemble the sanctuary it was meant to be again. The silence returned, this time accompanied by the scent of lemon cleaner and the faint hum of the refrigerator instead of voices and laughter. It was peace, fragile and precious, but mine again. Yet that evening, just as we settled on the porch with glasses of wine, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my cousin, one of the ones who had left without saying much. "Your sister's telling everyone you kicked us out. She says you embarrassed her in front of the whole family." My heart sank as I read the words, and I passed the phone to my husband. His jaw tightened slightly, but he only shook his head. "I told you," I murmured, sinking back against the chair. "She won't let it go." More messages trickled in as the night went on. Some relatives expressed confusion, others annoyance. A few defended me, saying they understood, but most seemed caught between the story my sister was weaving and the truth of what had happened. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. This house was supposed to bring people together in healing, in honesty, in generosity, and yet here it was already a battlefield of pride and ego. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying my sister's smug smile when she had first arrived with her army of relatives. She hadn't seen what this house was truly about. She hadn't cared. To her, it had been an opportunity to show off, to play the role of a leader, to make herself look important. And now that her illusion had been shattered, she was retaliating in the only way she knew how, by poisoning the narrative. The days that followed were a strange mix of tranquility and tension. On the surface, the lake house was everything I had dreamed. Quiet mornings on the porch, afternoons spent reading by the water, evenings where the stars seemed close enough to touch. But beneath that peace, a quiet war brewed. My phone kept buzzing with family drama, each message a reminder that my sister was painting me as cold, ungrateful and selfish. "You should have let us enjoy the house," one aunt wrote. "Family comes first." Another message stung even more. "You've changed. You think you're better than us now." I tried to brush it off, reminding myself of the bigger picture, of the retreat we were building, of the good that would come from this house. But late at night, when the silence pressed too close, doubt crept in. Had I been too harsh? Could I have handled it differently? Was I really as selfish as they said? One evening I decided to take a walk down the dock. The water was still, reflecting the fading light of dusk. I stood there, breathing deeply, trying to release the tension in my chest. And then I heard footsteps behind me. My husband appeared. His face lit faintly by the twilight. "Still thinking about them?" he asked gently. He nodded. "I can't stop. It's like she's in my head, twisting everything. I wanted this place to bring peace, not more conflict." He stepped beside me, his arm brushing mine. "Peace doesn't come easy," he said softly. "Sometimes you have to fight for it. Sometimes you have to draw the line so people know what peace is worth." His words sank deep, anchoring me. That night, I resolved to stop letting my sister's version of the story define me. If she wanted to twist the truth, so be it. The people who mattered would see through it eventually. And those who didn't, well, maybe they didn't belong in the sanctuary I was building. Not everyone deserved access to peace, especially those who trampled over it without respect. Still, part of me knew this wasn't the end. My sister had always been relentless, always seeking the upper hand. She had lost this round, but I could feel her next move brewing somewhere beyond the horizon. And while part of me dreaded it, another part, the part that had stood firm in my living room and spoken the truth, was ready. The lake house was mine. Our dream was alive. and I would not let anyone, not even my sister, tear it apart again. The following week passed in a strange rhythm of quiet mornings and tense afternoons. The lake seemed calmer than ever, the water glinting in the sunlight like a mirror that reflected everything around it. And yet beneath the surface, there was something unsettled, as if the house itself sensed what was coming. My husband and I had returned to our routine, waking early, sipping coffee on the porch, and tidying the house meticulously, reclaiming it from the chaos my sister had left behind. The stillness of the place was intoxicating, almost addictive, but it was also deceptive. Every message that popped up on my phone reminded me that the family drama had not vanished. My sister was orchestrating her own quiet campaign, forwarding versions of the story, embellishing events, and turning her embarrassment into outrage that I was supposedly the villain. I ignored most of it, letting the calls go unanswered and the messages sit unread, but the unease in the pit of my stomach refused to leave. I knew it wasn't enough to simply endure her actions. I had to be ready for the moment she came back, the moment when she would inevitably return to the house to prove, in her mind, that she still had control. One afternoon, while I was arranging fresh flowers on the kitchen counter, I heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on the driveway. My heart jumped and I froze. Peeking through the window, I saw her car pulling up. My sister. She had returned. I swallowed hard and took a deep breath. This was it. The confrontation I had been dreading and anticipating all week. She stepped out of the car, her posture rigid, her face a mask that was somewhere between forced calm and simmering irritation. She carried herself as though she belonged here, as if the house had never been ours to begin with. I felt my chest tighten but reminded myself to remain composed. My husband, standing behind me, gave a subtle nod. Remember, calm, control, clarity, his eyes seemed to say. When she entered, she tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I thought I'd come back and help, maybe make amends, she said, her tone sharp but measured. I nodded slowly, gesturing for her to take a seat in the living room. Thank you for coming, I replied evenly. I'm glad you're here. We can talk. The tension between us was thick enough to slice with a knife. She glanced around, her eyes flicking over the polished floors, the spotless countertops, the order we had restored. She opened her mouth to speak, paused, and then shut it again. It was as if she realized that her attempts to dominate this space were futile. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound coming from the faint lapping of the lake against the shore. I decided to speak first. Look, I know you think I embarrassed you, I began, keeping my voice calm but firm. I didn't. I spoke the truth. This house has a purpose, and it isn't here to entertain anyone who comes without asking. It's a sanctuary, a place for giving, not taking. Her lips pressed together, a vein of frustration evident in her jaw. You humiliated me in front of everyone, she burst out suddenly, the calm veneer slipping for a moment. I held her gaze steadily. No, I said. You humiliated yourself by ignoring boundaries and assuming this place was yours to command. I didn't humiliate you. You showed your own lack of respect. Her face turned red, her hands clenching into fists, but she didn't interrupt. She was clearly searching for words that would give her back some measure of control, some way to turn the situation in her favor. I could see the storm inside her, the kind I had grown up learning to anticipate. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady but soft. You want to feel powerful. You want to look like the hero. That's fine. But the truth will always come through. People will see what happened here. I don't need to defend myself anymore. I just need to do what's right for this house, for my family, and for the people who will come here seeking help. She recoiled slightly, clearly taken aback. No one had ever spoken to her this way, not calmly, not without fear, not with the weight of conviction behind it. Her usual smirk was gone, replaced by uncertainty, and for the first time I realized how fragile her bravado really was. It was all a mask, a performance she had perfected over years, and now it was cracking. The silence returned, but it was a different silence. Charged, expectant, almost electric, as if the house itself were holding its breath for what would come next. We continued talking, slowly unraveling the tension that had built up over the last week. I listened as she tried to explain herself, to justify her actions, to frame her arrival as an act of love and generosity. I responded with truth and patience, refusing to engage in accusations or tantrums. Instead, I let my words reflect the reality of what had happened, the boundaries she had crossed, the respect she had failed to show. By the time the sun began to dip behind the trees, painting the lake in hues of orange and pink, I could see her perspective beginning to shift. She was still stubborn, still proud, but she was listening. And listening, I realized, was half the battle. Later, we walked down to the dock together, the tension easing slightly with each step. The water sparkled in the last light of day, the gentle waves creating a rhythm that seemed to calm even the most stubborn of tempers. My husband stayed behind, giving us the space to speak, and I felt a small measure of hope. "I don't want to fight with you," I said quietly. "I just want this house to mean what it's supposed to mean. You could have been part of that, but you chose something else." She stayed silent, staring at the water. Finally she said, I didn't realize. I thought I was helping. I see now that I crossed a line." The words were hesitant, but they were there, and that was enough for me to know that the tension might finally begin to break. That night after she left, the house seemed even more alive than before, not with chaos but with potential. I wandered from room to room, touching the surfaces we had restored, walking through the open windows where the breeze carried the scent of the lake inside. I thought about what had happened, about how easy it would have been to let anger dictate my actions, to lash out and escalate the conflict. But instead we had held firm, used patience and truth as our shields, and reclaimed the power that had temporarily slipped through our fingers. My sister's return had been tense, yes, but it had also been a turning point. I realized that boundaries, when enforced with calm determination, could not easily be broken. The days that followed were quieter. My sister reached out occasionally, cautiously, offering small gestures of apology. Some were awkward, some insincere, but each one was a reminder that she had begun to understand that the house was not hers to control. The family at large began to recalibrate, the gossip slowing as people realized that the truth was consistent, steady, and undeniable. And as the house returned to its rhythm of peaceful mornings, productive afternoons, and serene evenings, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not just in reclaiming our home, but in knowing that we had handled the situation with integrity. By the end of the week, the lake house felt truly ours again, stronger and more alive than ever. The walls no longer echoed with confusion and chaos, but with a quiet energy that carried promise. The water lapped against the shore in gentle harmony. The air smelled of pine and fresh lake breeze, and I could finally walk through the house without tension knotting my shoulders. I knew challenges would come, that my sister might test boundaries again, that family dynamics were never simple or predictable. But I had learned something crucial, that calm conviction, clear communication, and unwavering adherence to one's principles could reshape even the stormiest situations. As the sun set on that fourth evening, painting the sky in colors that made the lake shine like liquid gold, I sat on the porch with my husband. We held hands, watching the water ripple in silence, letting the lessons of the past week settle in. "We did it," he whispered. "We held our ground." I nodded, feeling the weight of exhaustion and triumph in equal measure. "Yes," I replied. "And this house will never just be a house again. Something more now. Something stronger. Something worth protecting." And in that quiet moment, as the day faded and the stars began to emerge one by one, I finally felt the calm I had been chasing from the very beginning, a sense that the sanctuary we had dreamed of was no longer just a vision. It was real, tangible, and unshakable. The days after my sister's visit settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and exhilarating. The lake house, once filled with noise and tension, was finally quiet, but it was more than just absence of sound. It was alive with possibility. Mornings came with golden sunlight spilling through the windows, warming the polished floors we had worked so hard to restore. The air smelled of pine, lake water, and fresh earth, and for the first time since we had moved in, I could walk through each room without a sense of dread pressing on my chest. My husband and I spent time together, sipping coffee on the porch, planning the ways we would turn this house into the sanctuary we had envisioned. No interruptions, no chaos, just the slow, steady pulse of life flowing in harmony with our vision. And yet, even as peace returned, I knew this was more than just a personal victory. It was a turning point. The week's events had taught me something I hadn't fully realized before. Boundaries, once set and defended with clarity, could create not only protection but also transformation. In the mornings, I walked down to the dock alone, the water calm and glassy, reflecting the sky above like a perfect mirror. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional call of a bird or the gentle lap of water against the posts. I let my thoughts drift over the chaos of the previous week, the uninvited relatives, my sister's smirk, the tension in the living room, and I allowed myself a quiet sense of pride. I had faced the challenge without letting anger or ego control me. I had spoken the truth and enforced boundaries, and in doing so, I had reclaimed more than a house. I had reclaimed the respect for the vision I held, the purpose I had created. My husband joined me at the dock later, carrying 2 mugs of tea, and we sat side by side, legs dangling above the water, watching the sunlight sparkle across the surface. We didn't need to speak. The calm was enough, the shared understanding more powerful than any words. As the week progressed, I began to reach out to other family members, not in anger or accusation, but in invitation. Those who had been confused or caught between my sister's stories and the truth now received the opportunity to see the house, not as a playground or a hotel, but as a space for reflection, for healing, for giving. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. Relatives arrived, carefully, with respect and humility, and each visit reminded me why this house was meant to exist beyond just our own enjoyment. I watched as people who had experienced hardship, who had stories of loss and struggle, walked through the rooms with quiet awe, tears sometimes forming at the edges of their eyes, and I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what I had dreamed of. Not chaos, not ego, not pride, but purpose. This house my husband and I had created was becoming exactly what we had hoped, a place where people could breathe, reflect, and begin to heal. My sister, despite her initial resistance, began to change too, though slowly. She came back one afternoon, unannounced, carrying a tray of pastries she had baked herself. I was in the kitchen, arranging fresh flowers, when I heard the knock at the door. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it to see her standing there, a little smaller somehow, her expression less confident than before. I wanted to help, she said, her voice quieter than I expected. I studied her for a moment, noting the subtle humility in her stance. I see that, I replied gently. And it's good you're here. But this house isn't about proving yourself. It's about helping others. She nodded, as if she understood in a way she hadn't before, and we began to work together quietly, side by side, preparing tea, arranging seating, and organizing a small welcome for a family who had arrived that afternoon. The tension between us, though not entirely gone, had softened into something more manageable. It was a cautious truce, based on shared purpose rather than forced politeness, but it was a start. By the end of that week, the house had transformed into a living, breathing entity. It felt alive not with chaos but with intention. Each room had a purpose. The living room for reflection, the kitchen for nourishment, the porch for quiet contemplation, the bedrooms for rest and recovery. My husband and I moved through the space with a sense of pride and fulfillment that went beyond mere ownership. We were stewards, caretakers of a vision that now extended far beyond our own walls. The families who visited left with smiles, sometimes with tears, and always with gratitude. Their presence reminded me of the house's true mission, and made every moment of frustration with my sister and her uninvited relatives seem small in comparison to the good that could come from this place. And then, one evening, after a long day of preparation and quiet visits, I found myself sitting alone on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The lake was a perfect mirror, reflecting the fiery orange and pink of the sky. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of water and pine, and for the first time I felt complete. My husband joined me, slipping his arm around my shoulders. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his presence, and nodded. It is. And it's more than that. It's alive. It's what we dreamed it would be, and more. Nothing could take that away from us now. Not even the chaos of family, not even my sister. He kissed my temple softly, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me, for him, for this house, for the peace we had fought to create and protect. In the weeks that followed, my sister's visits became less about control and more about participation. She began to understand the importance of respect and boundaries, not just for the house, but for the people who came seeking refuge within it. She helped with small tasks, sometimes quietly, sometimes with tentative suggestions, and though her ego still surfaced occasionally, it was tempered by an emerging sense of humility. Our relationship, once fraught with tension and resentment, began to shift. I could feel the old patterns of rivalry softening, replaced by a new understanding, that respect and purpose could overcome pride and selfishness when one was willing to listen and act with integrity. One evening, as a family we had been preparing for arrived at the lake house for a retreat, I watched them step through the door with cautious curiosity. Their eyes widened at the view, at the carefully arranged rooms, at the warmth of the space. I could see the weight of their worries lift, just slightly, as they began to explore. My sister stood beside me, handing out towels, offering gentle guidance, and for the first time I didn't see her as an adversary. I saw her as someone who had grown, someone who had learned, however slowly, the value of respect, of boundaries, and of purpose beyond personal gratification. We exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of what had changed between us and within the house itself. As night fell and the family settled in, the house hummed softly with quiet conversation and the rustle of gentle movement. I walked through the rooms, checking each one, noting the small touches my husband and I had added to make the space welcoming. And when I finally returned to the porch, I found my sister already there, staring out at the lake. We didn't speak immediately. Words weren't necessary. The sky was painted in deep blues and purples, the water reflecting it like liquid silk. I sat down beside her, letting the silence hold us both. Finally she spoke, her voice soft. I didn't understand before. Think I do now. This is more than just a house. It's a gift. I smiled, the tension of weeks fading with each word. It is, I said simply. And it always will be, as long as we remember what it's for. In that moment I realized that the house had taught us all something crucial. Not just about boundaries or control, but about empathy, purpose, and the importance of standing firm in one's vision while remaining open to growth and understanding. The family outside laughed quietly, sharing stories, while the lake shimmered under the moonlight. My husband squeezed my hand, a wordless confirmation of all we had endured and achieved. And as I leaned back, breathing in the cool night air, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't known was possible. The house, our dream, was finally whole, not just as a place, but as a sanctuary, a refuge, a testament to patience, truth, and the power of purpose. By the time the stars dotted the sky, I knew that nothing could undo what we had built here. Not pride, not chaos, not even family drama. This lake house was ours to protect, to cherish, and to share in the way it was meant to be shared. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself truly relax, knowing that the vision we had fought for had not only survived the storm but had emerged stronger, filled with potential and hope for every person who would ever walk through its doors. In that quiet, starlit moment, I understood that this was more than a victory. It was a beginning. Enjoyed this story? Like, comment, and share your thoughts with us. Subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more gripping stories and twists.